the best-selling author of The Harbinger returns, and his latest discovery will blow your mind. Plus, is it the end of Euromania?
I don't believe that flag really represents what Europe should be.
Find out why the EU may be on the brink of collapse. And then, an all-pro comeback. Hear how Giants lineman Mark Herzlich beat the odds on today's 700 Club.
Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the 700 Club. After admitting that he didn't have a strategy for dealing with the bloodthirsty ISIS terrorists and getting briefed on them for more than a year, President Obama finally says he has a plan to defeat the Islamic monsters. But critics are already asking, will what his plan be enough?
Well, we'll all get to hear that plan as the president is explaining it in a speech to the country tonight. Ephraim Graham has the story.
President Obama says he has a strategy to degrade and defeat ISIS, and he's now making his pitch to the American people.
This is an important opportunity for the president to communicate a very important message about our priorities and our national security to the American public.
The president's plan is expected to call for Congress to sign off on a program to arm and train Syrian rebels to take the fight to the militant group directly on the ground, and increasing airstrikes in Iraq against ISIS, possibly expanding them into Syria. And he won't have to convince the American people about the need to take more aggressive action. The latest Washington Post ABC News survey shows 71% supporting airstrikes in Iraq and 65% wanting to see airstrikes in Syria. The president already outlined his plan for a broader military effort to congressional leaders inside the Oval Office Tuesday. But the White House tells congressional leaders of both parties he doesn't need their authorization to take the actions he's planning. Senator Mitch McConnell was in that meeting.
The view of myself and most of my members is the president should be seeking congressional approval, period, for whatever he decides to do.
The president does have support in Congress, but critics still question why it's taken him so long to react to the threat from ISIS, which is now trying to recruit young women using social media. On the eve of the anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks on the United States, an NBC News poll shows 47% believe America is less safe now than before September 11th. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Thanks, Ephraim. Folks, it's politics. He's slumping in the polls. A number of senators are in critical condition. The chances of the Democrats holding on to the Senate is very slim, and that will mean a roadblock to the president's future for the next couple of years in terms of any policy changes. But you ask yourself, what went on in his mind? His close advisors were all telling him, look, you've got to do something in Syria. You've got to take this ISIS thing seriously. And he ignored it. It was the JV team and so forth. The rhetoric was that we have defeated al-Qaeda, we have killed Osama bin Laden, and they're in serious decline, and we can get out with our head held high. Well, it just didn't work that way. But what's he going to do next? And how will the American people or our allies believe him? Well, ISIS terrorists could also soon be threatening the nation of Israel. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Here's John.
Pat, the newest Islamic threat to Israel comes out of the fighting in Syria from a group called al-Nusra. And as Chris Mitchell reports, ISIS could be right behind it. His latest report now from Israel's strategic Golan Heights.
In late August, an Islamic group with ties to al-Qaeda scored big gains against the Syrian army. The fighting took place on Israel's northern doorstep. This is an observation point overlooking the Israeli-Syrian border. We've been hearing explosions in the background and seeing plumes of smoke, presumably fighting between al-Nusra forces and the Assad regime. One of the most important victories al-Nusra has won recently is taking over the strategic connector crossing about a mile behind me. For years, that served as the only portal between Israel and Syria.
Look at this. Look, there's a big mushroom there now. You see it? So the war is going on there all the time.
Arik Golansky manages a restaurant close to the border. It's in Kibbutz Marom Golan, with horses and guest houses. Now there's a new terrorist neighbor.
Al-Nusra control now 80% of the whole region of Konetra. It's not just here, but it's also the city, the villages.
The Golan Heights sits along Israel's northern border with Syria. Israel won the land in the 1967 Six-Day War, and for 40 years it's been Israel's quietest border. Now UN observers monitor the fighting from the heights. Recently, al-Nusra captured 45 peacekeepers. Al-Nusra is on Israel's border now, but Golansky says ISIS is not far behind.
They are more towards to the south of the Golan, and most of them are between Syria and Lebanon.
Despite the fighting nearby, life for Israelis in the Golan Heights goes on. Lilak Ashtar serves as a community liaison with the IDF.
We live a very peaceful life, but we know that a few kilometers away there is a war.
Israel will be ready, the border will be ready. The question is if the whole world is ready for this change of the Islam movement.
Being ready is why 2 U.S. pastors brought their tour group to the border.
Just to pray for the peace of Jerusalem, pray for the peace of the nation Israel, and that we need to support them and stand with them.
The proximity of that push so close to the border here of Israel is a concern for all of us, and was certainly for the people here of Israel and the land of Israel, but for the world.
Israel sits on the front lines, but the memory of 9/11 shows radical Islam knows no boundaries. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, on the Israeli-Syrian border.
Thanks, Chris. Back to you, Pat.
I remember when that war was going on some years ago, and when the Israeli forces took Konetra, it was a big deal. And I guess they've given it back to Syria, but they're right there on the Golan. I've been up there with the head of the IDF and looking at what they had, and it's a clear sweep right into Syria. You go all the way down to the Euphrates, and if this terrible rebel army gets loose, they will not only take over the Golan Heights, they'll sweep down into Israel if they possibly can. But before they do that, they'll take over Lebanon. So, I mean, it's their appetite for territory knows no bounds, and we have to do something about it. Well, it's one country that has been very close to America for years. They speak English. They were founded by President Monroe. And now they say that it's just in critical condition. Let's go to John.
Pat, that's right. Liberia's national defense minister is warning that the Ebola epidemic now threatens the existence of his country. He told the United Nations Security Council the disease has now spread from the countryside to major cities.
We are meeting at a time when Liberia is facing a serious threat to national existence. The deadly Ebola virus has caused a disruption of the normal functioning of our state. The disease, which early this year was identified in the remote villages of our country, has now reached urban centers, including the capital, Monrovia. It is now spreading like wildfire, devouring everything in its path.
The UN envoy for Liberia also warns the deadly virus has political, economic, and social implications for the country. And the World Health Organization says thousands more cases could occur in Liberia, which has been hardest hit. Health officials believe the number of Ebola cases is actually significantly higher than what's being reported.
I can't say enough about just how grave this is, just how deep the needs are, and just how great the challenge is going to be. What we mustn't forget is that there are other crises lurking in the shadow of Ebola. The regular health system has collapsed, bringing the potential for other health problems in its wake.
Nearly 2,300 people have died from Ebola in Liberia, as well as Guinea and Sierra Leone. Pat, you've been saying we need to act now before it's too late.
There's no question. It is one of the most vicious, horrible diseases. And again, I tell you what happens when they get the Ebola virus. It attacks every single organ in the body. They all begin to collapse, and then they begin to flow with blood. And blood is flowing out of every orifice of the body in agonizing, racking pain. And it's just a question of a short period of time before the person dies. Now, all you have to do is touch a little bit of that stuff, you know, one drop of blood someplace and you can get it. It's not airborne, and that's a good thing. But nevertheless, it is highly contagious. And in a third world environment, when they don't have proper sanitation, it can spread like wildfire, and that's what's happening in Liberia. They have poor sanitation, poor living conditions, and a lot of superstition still in those African countries that they have all kinds of beliefs that are false about disease. And it's a difficult thing. And as the lady said, the health providers are leaving. You know, not only have a number of them died, but they don't want to expose themselves to this stuff. And there may not be enough hazmat suit for them to wear to protect themselves. So if they're working with Ebola patients, the chances of them contacting Ebola is very strong. So it's a terrible situation. But when they begin to get on airplanes and fly to Europe and fly to America, it won't be long before we have an outbreak of that stuff here, and we don't want it. John?
Pat, here at home, Indiana and Wisconsin have asked the Supreme Court to decide whether gay marriage should be legal in all 50 states. In two separate requests, the state's attorneys general cited the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals ruling declaring their state bans on gay marriage unconstitutional. Officials from Wisconsin and Indiana say it's an opportunity for the High Court to settle the debate once and for all. The Supreme Court decision to get involved in the issue of gay marriage could come as soon as the end of this month, but a final ruling isn't likely before June 2015. More than 90% of kids in schools are eating far more salt than they should. The Centers for Disease Control says 9 out of 10 kids are consuming about 3,300 milligrams of salt every day, when the government recommends less than 2,300 milligrams. Much of that salt comes from processed foods like pizza, burgers, Mexican food, pastas, soups, and snacks. And much of those foods come from outside the home in restaurants and school cafeterias. Diets with too much salt can lead to high blood pressure, which can cause heart disease and strokes. Pat?
I recommend strongly that you read the labels on the food you eat. My dear, wonderful wife still doesn't look at all the labels. But the labels tell you how much sodium, and you look at some processed barbecue sauce and that kind of thing, 800 to 900 milligrams per tablespoon of barbecue sauce. You look at some of the soup, hundreds of milligrams of salt, other kinds of processed meat and so forth, and loaded with sauce. Why do they put so much salt in? To make it taste good. And then, of course, you've got a group of thing called salt snacks. The beer companies put them out in order to get us thirsty so that we would want to drink more beer. And so you have all these pretzels and chips and things like that that are loaded with salt, and they're deliberately loaded with salt so that the person who consumes them will want something to drink. And the drink of choice, of course, for the beer companies was more of their special brew. Well, that's the way it is. I was very thrilled yesterday when I attended a ceremony at Regent University where the speaker was the head of the Eastern Virginia Medical School. It was a great breakthrough for this school, and let's have John tell us more about it.
That's right, Pat. Regent University has officially inaugurated a new undergraduate degree program in biophysical sciences. Students and academic professionals attended the inaugural event, including Dr. Richard Homan, president of Eastern Virginia Medical School. With a fully equipped scientific lab, this program is designed to provide students with both scientific knowledge and a strong education in ethics and humanities, training professionals to bridge the gap between science and faith.
The healthcare sciences is a huge field. STEM is a huge field of national importance, but we also know that we need very well-educated scientists and individuals who can think deeply about science and the humanities and theology and faith in public policy, in think tanks, in government, in other areas. So we want students to be able to do all of those.
Dr. Riaño says it's not simply a matter of bridging the gap between faith and science, but a call to explore and proclaim the greatness of this world that's been created. Pat, creation shows his splendor and reigning majesty.
Well, it sure does, and I think true science is a handmaiden of the religious thrust. The idea that there's a conflict should not be the case. You don't necessarily agree with the conclusions of some scientists, but you can't disagree with their empirical research. And so this is going to open the door for a number of degrees. There's so many fields now of opportunity, and as Dr. Holman said, as I recall, it's 18% of the GDP is now spent on health care. It's unbelievable. And so there are many, many well-paying jobs available. And so Regent University and the undergrad and graduate programs will be preparing students for that. And I'm so delighted to have an assist of an initiative from a very outstanding medical school. So that will help the students in their pursuit of further knowledge. But this lab, to me, is beautiful. When I was in college, we didn't have anything like it. It's just gorgeous. Did you see it, Terry?
I didn't see it, but I'm going to see it.
Oh, you must go. It is just amazing. It's
That's
just
wonderful.
Yeah, it's really nice.
That's quite a development. Well, we are just a day away from the anniversary of 9/11, a day that one author says may have been predicted in the Bible. Find out why. But first, the world is being torn apart around us, so what is the EU setting its sights on instead? Stay tuned for a stunning report from CBN News. That's next.
What path are you on? Will it begin to change your life? Will it begin to change the world? Take the first step at Regent University. Whether you choose our campus or online, our nationally recognized accredited Christian education can blend your knowledge and your faith at one of the world's best universities, Regent University. Follow your path. Go to regent.edu to take the first step.
Tomorrow,
a plane just hit the Twin Towers.
A New York City firefighter remembers the day that changed everything. And then,
we're turning bullets into bubbles.
The side of one company that's being hidden by the mainstream media. And then, best-selling author Jan Karon returns to Mitford. Get an exclusive look at her new book tomorrow on The 700 Club.
The European Union. My goodness. I remember the man from Belgium who was hailing that. He said, be he a devil or being a god, just somebody to lead us out of these problems. Well, the EU was supposed to be a shining symbol of European unity. Instead, the European Union is proving to be a bloated, bureaucratic mess. And it's also turned out to be highly unpopular, not only with European voters, even some members of the European Parliament itself. Our Dale Hurd has got an in-depth look at a story from Brussels.
While Russia was fighting Ukraine and the Middle East was in chaos, the European Union was tackling the really important issues, banning powerful household vacuum cleaners. EU bureaucrats made the heroic move in order to save the planet. Now, whenever Europeans vacuum with their weak vacuum cleaners, they'll be reminded of how European Union laws have taken over more and more of their lives. A former leader of the Czech Republic who grew up under communism came to Brussels and he gave a speech. And he told EU lawmakers that the European Union reminded him of the Soviet Union. And he was booed. Václav Klaus saw in Brussels a Soviet-style group of elites deciding what they thought was good for Europeans and then ramming it down their throats. But all of the new laws out of Brussels restricting vacuum cleaners or the size of fruit have not made Europeans freer or more prosperous. EU economic growth in the second quarter was zero, and economists say the third quarter is looking worse. Economic sanctions against Russia will rob Europe of key markets. And now even powerful EU member Germany is reported to be at risk of recession. In fact, the healthiest, most competitive economy in Europe is not even in the EU. It's Switzerland. So if the European Union isn't making Europeans freer or more prosperous, what's the point of it? Dutch filmmaker Peter Vlemix asked himself a similar question and made a documentary entitled Euromania.
The European Union, its mission statement is to improve the life of the European citizens. But in my eyes, it's improving the life of some European politicians.
Vlemix's film shows a corrupt, bloated bureaucracy that keeps growing and taking more and more sovereignty away from member nations, replacing 70 to 80% of national laws with EU laws.
Every law coming out of Brussels automatically overrules national law. So every day there is like laws coming and taking powers away from the countries.
And several years ago, when some European nations showed their disapproval of where the EU wanted to take them and voted down a proposed European constitution, the EU just went around voters and ratified one anyway. With its laws cranked out by an unelected European Commission and then forced on member nations, it certainly looks very undemocratic.
Those accusations are somewhat misplaced, but of course they make for nice sound bites.
Marco Incerti is with the Center for European Policy Studies in Brussels.
The European Union is not more undemocratic than other organizations, including national government. All of the surveys show that, in fact, the level of trust that European citizens have in the European Parliament is actually higher than the level of trust they have in their national parliaments, and it's way higher, for example, the level that the Americans have in the Congress.
But according to a Pew survey earlier this year, European support for the EU continues to fall. This was the opening of the European Parliament in July. While the EU anthem was played, several members stood with their backs turned. After disastrous May elections that led to historic gains by so-called Eurosceptic parties like Britain's UK Independence Party, the European Parliament is now full of members who don't like the European Union and, in fact, want to destroy it.
I don't just want Britain to leave the European Union, I want Europe to leave the European Union. I don't believe that flag, that anthem, and that president, whose name no one knows, really represent what Europe should be.
Pro-EU parties are still in the majority for now, and the behemoth that is the European Union will continue to rumble on. But despite a quiet summer, all is not well within the European Union. With yet another economic crisis on the horizon, anger at Brussels could flare up again. The European Union may seem big and unsinkable, but it may also be headed for an iceberg. Dale Hurd, CBN News, Brussels.
Well, we'll keep our eyes on it. Thanks, Dale. Terry?
Well, still ahead, unlocking the mystery of the Shemitah. Find out how this ancient tradition could reveal what's in store for America's future. Year-old Sam Nang works hard to help his family put food on the table. He's always enjoyed helping his mother, until one day when a simple task nearly cost him his life.
12-year-old Sam Nang has two jobs he loves, taking care of his cow and catching a few fish from the pond for the family's main meal of the day. There's another job he dreads, getting water from an open pit well.
The water from this well is very dirty. I often see frogs, snake skin, and garbage in it, but we use it for everything. I don't want to drink the water from the well, but I have no choice.
Sam Nang's mother filters it and sometimes boils it, but the children still get sick.
I remember one time I was so sick that my parents had to take me to the hospital. I had to miss school for 3 days.
One day, Sam Nang accidentally fell into the open pit well.
I was very scared. I got hurt when I fell, and I felt so cold.
Sam Nang is the only Christian in his family and prayed that help would come. Then his brother, who had seen him fall into the well, quickly pulled him out with a rope.
After that, I didn't want to go back to the well. I was afraid to fall in again. I prayed that God would make another way for us to get water.
So Sam Nang was very excited when CBN dug a new well with a pump near his home. Now he, his family, and his whole community have fresh, clean drinking water. The open pit well has been covered up, and there have been no more accidents. Sam Nang's family was so touched by CBN's help that they too prayed to become Christians.
I'm so happy that everyone in my family believes in Jesus now. Thank you, CBN. I don't have to be afraid to get water anymore.
Well, I don't know about you, but when I see him getting ready to drink that dirty water, I want to yell, stop, don't drink it. Clean water, it's such a significant need just for you and I to have life. And we do it so easily here in the United States, we hardly think about it. Turn on the tap, take a drink of water. We buy plastic bottles of water when we're thirsty. In other parts of the world, it is not available like that. And yet, when we all link arms together, we can make it available. We want to say thank you if you're a 700 Club member, because this is the kind of thing that you make possible. Life-changing help to people around the world. If you're not a 700 Club member, this is a great day to join. It's just 65 cents a day, $20 a month. You can join with thousands of us who are out to touch the lives of people around the world with a loving hand up. Not a handout. We're doing that in many, many different ways. So join us and be a part of that. And when you call to join the 700 Club, call that toll-free number on your screen, 1-800-759-0700. Just say, I want to join the 700 Club. And would you say you'd like to do it using Pledge Express? That's electronic monthly giving. It means your bank does all the work. Saves us some processing costs so we can help even more families like Sam Nang's. And when you use Pledge Express, we've got a special gift for you this month. It's a brand new CD from Pat called Psalms of Encouragement. You are going to love this. It's something you can listen to throughout the day for peace, for joy, for comfort, for strength. Best of all, it's free. It's our gift to you when you sign up for Pledge Express. It's only available the month of September. But we want you to know not only will you receive Psalms of Encouragement, but you'll also receive monthly teachings from Pat and Gordon throughout the year. So that's the number to call. If you're already a 700 Club member and you're using Pledge Express, you'll automatically get this. But if you're not, this is a great day to do it. So call now.
Good word. Well, what if we told you that an ancient prophecy correctly predicted the economic collapses of the past and says there may be another one in store in our future? Author Jonathan Cahn unlocks the mystery of the Shemitah when we come back.
CBN presents Psalms of Encouragement.
Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake.
Our gift to you when you join Pledge Express.
Welcome back to Washington for this CBN News Break. Lawmakers are probing a government program that gives military-grade equipment to police departments across the nation. A Senate hearing called into question why local authorities needed armored vehicles, automatic weapons, and camouflage uniforms to police their communities. The hearing came in the wake of the violent confrontations between police and protesters in Ferguson, Missouri, after the shooting death of Michael Brown. More than $5 billion worth of military equipment has gone to local police departments since the Pentagon authorized the program back in 1990. It's intended to help cities and towns fight the drug war and respond to terrorist attacks. But Senator Rand Paul says local police are increasingly using the sophisticated, intimidating equipment for crowd control. A grand jury has indicted a man accused of killing 7 people at a small Christian college in California. 45-year-old Juan Go was indicted for a shooting incident at Oikos University in Oakland 2 years ago. A judge ruled that Go isn't mentally fit to stand trial after doctors diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. But the indictment means Go can face trial if he's found competent. The former Oikos student has pleaded not guilty. Authorities say Go planned the attacks after a dispute with the school. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com. Pat and Terry will be back with more of the 700 Club right after this.
Tomorrow,
A plane just hit the Twin Towers.
A New York City firefighter remembers the day that changed everything. And then,
we're turning bullets into bubbles.
The side of one company that's being hidden by the mainstream media. And then, best-selling author Jan Karon returns to Mitford. Get an exclusive look at her new book tomorrow on the 700 Club.
Well, millions of readers worldwide were spellbound by a book we were pleased to introduce, Jonathan Cahn's blockbuster book called The Harbinger. Now, Jonathan has a new book that he said holds the key to the rise and fall of nations, economic recession, financial collapse, and your future. Take a look.
The crash of the New York Stock Exchange, the Great Depression, the attacks of 9/11 are all events that were predicted centuries ago. Jonathan Cahn says that the scriptures are in line with these events and are determining America's financial future. His book, The Mystery of the Shemitah, explains these revelations and shares the secrets to achieving economic prosperity in America.
Jonathan Cahn is here with us today. Jonathan, I'm so glad to see you again. God bless
Great to
you.
be back, Pat.
God bless you.
My blessing.
I love The Harbinger. It was right on point. It was so dramatic and did so well. Now you've written one called The Mystery of the, what is it, Shemitah?
Yes.
What is the Shemitah?
The Shemitah, and this is a book I didn't plan to write,
okay.
But it just, there's so much in it. The Shemitah is one of the mysteries that begins with the Harbinger. And it is one that is literally determined the rise and fall of Wall Street, the rise and fall of nations. It is coming soon. The next one is coming, is happening. It has affected our lives, every one of our lives from the moment we were born. That's what kind of blew me away. The Shemitah is the Sabbath year in the Bible, and that every 7 years God said you will have a rest, and there's no buying, no sowing, no reaping. And on the last day of the Shemitah is the climax. It's called Elul 29. On that day, all debts are wiped out, all credits wiped out. It literally wipes the financial slate. It just completely clean. And the thing is, the amazing thing is that this mystery has continued into the modern times. It is operating.
What's the start date? How do you figure the start?
Of the Shemitah?
Of this cycle.
Okay, the cycle, well, it goes back from ancient times. The rabbis have taken it even from the destruction of the temple.
Okay.
And so it's been so they know when it is. And it's observed in Israel all the time, continuously.
When did it start?
Well, the last one was 2007 and 2008.
Well, way back when.
At least from it comes from Moses. It comes from Mount Sinai.
Yeah.
And this was given to Israel. And in fact, this became, here's the thing, that this was to be a blessing. But when Israel turned away from God, the Shemitah turns from a blessing to a sign of judgment on a nation that has driven God out of its life.
Well, you've got 7 years in the Shemitah, then you've got 49, 50 years for the Jubilee.
Yes. One of the mysteries in the book is called the mystery of the seventh Shemitah. When you get to the 7 Shemitahs, you have a mega Shemitah, which is the Jubilee.
Okay.
And actually, even that is part of it too, because there's one of the mysteries called the mystery of the seventh Shemitah that actually is linked to Israel and Jerusalem, even the return of Jerusalem, and the next pattern of that is coming very shortly. We are actually at the beginning of a Shemitah very soon. In fact, this month, within 2 weeks, it begins. And the thing is that when Israel was destroyed in 586 BC, God said it was based on this thing called the Shemitah. They were in Babylon for 70 years, based on the Shemitahs, the 70 years they didn't observe. So the Shemitah not only affects the financial realm, the economic realm, but also literally is linked to the destruction of nations or the rise of nations.
Now, in your Harbinger, you showed clearly how the United States was tied into the Harbinger. I mean, there was no question with all the various signs.
Yes.
How come the Shemitah affects the Gentiles instead of the Jews, or does it affect the whole world?
Yeah, well, it's not that. I would say the whole world. But, well, one, we're under the new covenant, And we are not, the first thing is that you know, literally God is able to use a biblical pattern to send a message to a nation, any nation. Now America, well, actually the Shemitah affects America and affects the world. Let me give you an example. Right. If you look at the greatest financial collapses in modern times, I mean long-term, Great Depression, Great Recession, are any of them linked to the Shemitah? The answer is the majority of them. The majority of the collapses happen in the year of the Shemitah.
Like the crash of the Great Depression?
That one as well, yes, and the Great Recession. It's amazing. I'll give you another. In the last 40 years, there have been 5 major financial collapses, long-term collapses, ups and downs. And every single one of them happens linked to the Shemitah. Every single one. Linked by this 7-year mystery. If you take, for instance, you take the greatest day crashes, single day crashes in Wall Street, and the percentage crashes, and do any of them happen at the time of in the Shemitah? There's a month called Tishri, which which that's the month when all these things are manifested. The majority of them happen all in this one month or cluster around this month. A majority of them. If you take, for instance, you notice, Pat, that financial analysts have been always puzzled that these great collapses seem to happen around October and September. Yeah. Well, they've been mystified. There's a reason. In the Bible, that is the exact time. It's the month of Tishri, which manifests this collapse in the Bible. And
well, I mean, you're supposed to, you know, forgive debts.
Yes.
And people go back to their farms and all this kind of stuff. But that isn't a collapse, but the collapse is a sign of judgment. So how does that work?
Yeah, well, what happens is it was originally, again, it was a blessing. But what happened is that Israel pursued other gods and idols and a material gain. And God said, okay, now the Shemitah is going to come by force. So what happens is literally, the nation is destroyed and literally the land rests. God says the land will rest because of the Shemitah. So what was meant to be a blessing turns into this sign of that it strikes the financial realm and literally wipes out accounts, because that's what happens with an economic collapse or a financial collapse. The scary thing is that it seems to be getting more and more intense, because in the year 2001, comes the greatest point crash in American history. It was caused by 9/11, which we're getting to. And when does it happen? It happens on the exact Elul 29 day appointed in the Bible of the day of wiping out accounts, appointed by God. That is a sign of a nation that has turned away from God. But that record lasts for 7 years. In 2008, it's finally broken by the other greatest collapse, the Great Recession. Right. Happens September 29th. When they go to Wall Street, they go to ring the bell refuses to ring that morning. Even Wall Street took it as a sign. Yeah. And you have the other greatest collapse in American history, 2008. When does it happen? On the exact same biblical day, Elul 29. The 2 greatest collapses in American history each happen on the day appointed in the Bible from ancient times, and they are separated by exactly 7 Hebrew years, down to the day, to the hour, to the minute, to the second. I mean, only God could put that together.
Are we going to have another 50 year anytime soon? You know, the Liberty Bell says proclaim liberty throughout the land.
That's from the Shemitah. And that's from the Jubilee. Yeah, well, the interesting thing is there's a link even with the restoration of the land of Israel, the Balfour Declaration, you know, because the Jubilee is about restoring the land. Right. And so that happens right at the time of the Shemitah, and then if you go 50 years later, or you go 7 Shemitahs later, you have Jerusalem. You have the restoration of Jerusalem. Okay. And now I'm not setting dates. And the book has dates, but you know, God can do it. But the next Shemitah starts this September. The peak is next September. It always builds up to a thing. And then the 50-year period, or what would be the Jubilee, would be 2016. We begin at the end of September of 2015.
But will that signal a collapse, an economic collapse first?
I believe, Now, I'm careful about date setting, but the point is I do believe we need to be ready, because if you go by the last 2, it happened exactly. I mean, down to the seconds. Yeah. So I believe, well, first of all, it's going to be Well, I believe whenever it comes, I believe a great shaking is coming to this nation. I mean, the harbingers converging to, the harbingers are continuing. This is, I believe, a great shaking that will involve the financial realm, the economic realm. It will even touch more than that. It can happen. I mean, the exact dates are in September of 2015. You know, and the other thing is that the Shemitah not only involves these realms, but also involves the rise of nations, including America. For instance, the Shemitah of 1917, America begins its rise, enters World War I. The world history shifts from Europe to America. You have, you know, the Shemitah in Hebrew means collapse and fall. So, and also it can mean a rise. So you have the beginning of the rise of America, you have collapse of other nations. If you go 4 Shemitahs later, you get to the Shemitah of 1945. Another global shaking, cataclysm, and you have Europe falling, America becomes the superpower, we enter a new age. If you go another 4 Shemitahs, it comes to another pivotal year, which is 1973, which is when America legalizes the killing of its unborn children. The financial realm collapses, and we lose our first war of Vietnam on the exact date that we won the war of World War II on the other Shemitah. And if you go, and on that same year, you have the building of this monument to celebrate America, which is the World Trade Center. If you go another 4 Shemitahs, it takes you to 2001, the Shemitah of 2001, and which culminates in September of 2001. And the word means, remember, it means collapse. You have the collapse of the towers that represent America's power, and you have the collapse of Wall Street. And so now we are heading to the next one. And so I do believe we should be ready. I do believe it is wise to prepare, because this thing has affected everything.
Well, this could be a global, you're talking about a global collapse in 2015?
Without setting dates, I believe if it follows the pattern, very likely. I believe no matter what, a great shaking is coming. But it could be, and another interesting, Pat, just kind of one of the things is, you know, the Bible speaks of the darkening of the sun. You know, it's a simple, now we're not saying that every time the sun is darkened, but interesting. In 2015, there will be 2 eclipses of the sun. Each one will mark the Shemitah. One will mark the exact middle center point of it, and the other will mark that Elul 29, the climax. The last time that happened, it was in 1987, when the solar eclipse happened on Elul 29. It led to Black Monday, the worst stock market. I mean,
huge collapse, 500 points on the Dow. And then the other time it happened around the time was 1931, which when it happened, it ushered in the collapse of a month in stock market history. So all these things are converging. And I mean, what it kind of says is, I mean, God is in charge. You know, God is in charge. Well, you know, the amount of debt that's out there right now in the United States is hideous, and it's around the world. I mean, it's insupportable. And if something like that happened, I mean, it would be a collapse of such epic proportions we can't contemplate it.
Absolutely. And one of the things I noticed, an economist came to me who saw what I wrote in The Mystery of the Shemitah and said, you realize that as the debt level of America goes up, that's when this phenomenon of the Shemitah increases, which is exactly biblical, because it wipes away debt, it wipes away credit, wipes away all these things. You know, it literally means collapse. And I believe, and I'll say something for those who are like nervous, you know, I would say, I mean, which some are.
You scared them to death. What do you mean?
Hopefully scare them to life. You know, but I would say that if you're afraid, you know, and say, well, safety, and I'm not a financial advisor, you know, but to say that in Hebrew, the word for safety is Yeshua, and Yeshua is Jesus. And the one safety I can say, make sure you're right with him. He's the only thing that stands and is not shaken. And I believe that a shaking's coming, but also God is redemptive, that the point is revival. Because I believe without a shaking, I don't believe this nation is coming back, but with a shaking. So God also tells us that God is in control of everything, everything. I mean, mind-boggling so.
Well, if money is our God, which it has become, God will take down the false God, the true God, and show himself strong.
Exactly. I mean, one of the things that happens in the pattern of judgment in the Bible is that it strikes the gods of the nation, or what the nation puts its hope in it, to shake it so that we'd come back to God. And another thing is, there's one of the things in the book called The Mystery of the Towers. And we probably won't have time to get into it, but there's a link in the Bible between the rising of towers and the rising of nations and power. And the interesting, so we've got now, in 2001, you have the collapse of a tower. Well, now we're building this tower in ground zero, which is one of the harbingers. And it looks like, and it you know, the World Trade Center was conceived in the year of the Shemitah, 1945. It was begun building in the year of the Shemitah in 1966. It was finished the 1973 year of the Shemitah. It was destroyed 2001, the year of the Shemitah. The next tower, this tower that's rising, was also conceived in that last week of 2001 when the leader said, "We shall rebuild," and and it looks like it may be completed in this year of the Shemitah. I would watch that because it's like the harbingers are converging with this other mystery of the Shemitah. It's saying really, God is God. You know, God is God.
Jonathan, it's an exciting thing. Ladies and gentlemen, I won't take any more out of what he's got in this book, but it's the mystery of the Shemitah. He goes into great detail about the building of towers, the Chrysler building and the other buildings that were evidence of the strength of America, and then the destruction of the World Trade Center. Fascinating, fascinating. You really believe this is going to happen?
I believe no matter what. I mean, that's what I would say. The one thing is, I believe we are due for a great shaking, and we should be ready. Now, does it have to happen? Does God have to do it according to the timing plan? He doesn't. He doesn't. But I would say, you know, it says a wise man prepares. I would be ready.
Well, if we could have revival, that's what we want. Jonathan, we appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, the mystery of the Shemitah. How do you get this? Is this out now?
This just came out last week, and it seems that this is the first interview I've done since the release because I was sick. So this is the first one. Is always the 700 Club. This is available everywhere: Amazon, Walmart, all around. It just came out. On the day it came out, it became the #5 book in the world on the planet. And it's actually going stronger than the Harbinger. So it's going forth.
I believe, did we introduce the Harbinger?
Yes. It was September 3rd. That was the release date. You didn't know it, but you just said, do it on September 3rd.
Maybe this is prophetic again.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Jonathan, I love you. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, Pat.
God bless you. Folks, here it is, the mystery of the Shemitah. Wow! Will it tell the future about the economic plight of America? Available wherever books are sold. Jonathan Cahn, follow-up to The Harbinger. God bless you. Wow. Terry.
Well, up next, we're going to bring it on with your email. One viewer writes, how does it work when you have a word of knowledge on the show? Is it only for a live broadcast? Stay tuned for Pat's answer to that. We'll be back in a moment.
To see this week's most viewed stories, go to CBN.com.
Well, let's bring it on with the email questions that you've submitted. Pat, this first one is from Pinel, who says, how does the word of knowledge work? Is it only for the live broadcast? I live in Africa, so I cannot see the live show. So is there any possibility of a word of knowledge for me?
So let me tell you something that happened in Africa. There was a lady I believe it was Kenya, a Christian lady. She happened to be watching a tape of the 700 Club. A group of thugs came into her house and threatened to kill her. While the program was on the air, I began praying. This is a tape, mind you. And the power of God fell so strong that those thugs were literally paralyzed, and they began to run from the house. They were so terrified because of the power of God on that program, on the tape, in the thing. Listen, all I know is that God is sovereign, and He will speak to us about things right now, and we'll have a word of knowledge about something that hasn't even happened. It'll take place 2 months in the future, and it may be in Africa, it could be in California, it could be the end of the world, wherever. But God's God, and to Him there's no such thing as a beginning, end. I mean, it's
no time.
It's a continuum of the time doesn't exist with God. All right.
Okay, this is Tony, Pat, who says, is it wise for Obama to unveil any plan having to do with ISIS? Can he possibly think, with thousands of terrorists in the USA, that they won't use his info against us? I've never understood why such info is so freely given. Can you explain?
He's trying to think of thousands of voters in the USA who will be voting against Democrats unless he gets off his rear and does something. And he isn't worried about revealing the secrets, although I think he's not going to blow his plan if he's got a concrete. But what he's going to say is, I'm going to bomb these people. He won't say who's going to get bombed, where they'll bomb them, or how many troops he'll send in, or whether he'll send in the SEAL teams. I mean, he's not going to do that. But the fact that he's going to say, I've got a strategy That's for domestic consumption, so people will not vote for Republicans or will vote for Democrats. That's what he's trying to do. Terry?
Okay, this is from Terry, who says, my husband has always been able to get good jobs with fair pay, but he's never been able to manage his paychecks very well. He'll use one credit card to pay another, and just recently, I found out he'd borrowed $800 to cover some of our bills. When I confront him, he always replies that he is, quote, handling it. He cashed in his 401, and now we're just living week to week with a mortgage and a child in college. Help. What do you think of this? And is it too late for a couple in their 50s to sort out this dilemma?
No, there's a lot of time left for you. You can have 20, 30, maybe even 40 years left. You can start getting the thing straightened out. But I do believe you need a financial advisor, a Christian financial advisor. I'm not recommending them on this program, but you need somebody, and your husband has got to shape up. Maybe he can turn the finances over to you or find somebody else that can manage things. He obviously doesn't know how to manage money. And you'll always be broke, and you'll always be living hand to mouth. And so see if you can't find a financial advisor, a Christian, Ron Blue or somebody like him who might know somebody who could give you some advice. But you obviously need it. But no, it's not too late to get things straightened out.
This is from J.M. Pat, who says, I know I am indwelt with the Holy Spirit because of the things I've seen him do through me and around me. My question is, do I have to be able to speak in tongues and the other things spoken about in the book of Acts to be truly saved?
Absolutely not. You're saved because of your faith in Jesus Christ, and you have given your heart to him, and he's become your Savior, and you are indwelt by the Holy Spirit. There is the indwelling Spirit, and there is the outpoured Spirit. The indwelling Spirit is to make you like Jesus. The outpoured Spirit is to let you perform the works of Jesus. And one is the baptism of the Holy Spirit. It's the difference between jumping in an ocean and drinking a glass of water. They're both you and water, but it's the question of the degree. There's a lot more water in the ocean. And when you're baptized in the Spirit, there's a lot more of his power. I was reading something today, though. He said he got his disciples, and he said he gave them power and authority to cast out demons and to heal the sick. That was something he gave to his disciples. And he said, I'm going to give you power, which is the ability to get it done, and authority, which gives you the authority to speak to demons. And this is for his people, and we need to accept it. Well, we leave you with today's Power Minute taken from Isaiah 44, verse 3. For I will pour water on the thirsty land and streams on the dry ground. I will pour out my Spirit on your offspring and my blessing on your descendants. But Terry and all of us will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.